Hello. I have been motivated to put together this presentation by the film Don't Look Up that is currently on Netflix. And its focus on the two scientists played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence and how the world responds to these scientists. So, I'm not here to talk about the film. I'd like to talk about a bit of the COP26 meeting, and I'm going to go on to talk about something else. So, in October 2021, there was this COP26 meeting in Glasgow, and it led to the Glasgow Climate Pact. And you can see the photos there of all the politicians. They're celebrating at the top because they've signed the agreement. So, looking back, so after this climate pact was signed, there's a lot of people in the media. Bill Nye, the science guy, one of them, saying that it was another failed climate conference. Greta Thunberg also says it's another failed climate conference. So, mainly due to the watered down language in the climate pact. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So, what did it achieve? These countries came together, spent a lot of money, a lot of CO2 emissions to fly to Glasgow and meet. So, they promised that they would cut emissions that would lead to a 2.4 degrees of warming. That's not the goal, that's what the scientists say is expected by the promised emissions cuts, but it's actually 2.424 degrees, so it's a range. However, countries are already walking back on the pledges they made in November, saying they're going to be too expensive. Scientists have said also that 2.4 to 4 degrees is going to be disastrous for the people on the planet. It is not clear also how the countries will achieve these targets. So UK, for example, have made a lot of ambitious targets, but there's no strategies in place to actually meet those targets. The next meeting will be in Egypt in 2023, and to revise the targets. Maybe there'll be some more progress there. Part of the language that I was talking about was that it was supposed to be phase out coal, as in get rid of coal entirely, don't burn any more coal. There was changed at the last minute to phase down coal, which is very subjective and like phase down. So countries have got a lot more wiggle room to still burn coal. So big cuts are needed to save the future, according to scientists, but these have not been made at this climate pact. It's not enough to save what scientists say would be enough to save the future. Okay, but I am not only talking about the COP26 meeting. I want to talk about the Montreal Protocol, which you may or may not have heard of. You may recognize this picture though, and some of you already sort of clocking that it's all about the ozone layer. But there's a lot of confusion about this, so I want to clear up. I'm not going to talk about the science of it because that's sort of irrelevant. I want to talk about why we care about it and why it matters that you know about the Montreal Protocol. So, the ozone layer is literally like the Earth's sunscreen. Okay, it is protecting us from the harmful UV light that would otherwise be hitting the Earth's surface. It absorbs more than 98% of the damaging UV light, and life could not exist without it. And life did not exist before the ozone layer formed. That's really important. So if the ozone layer is entirely destroyed, life could not exist. So what is destroying the ozone layer? So we've got these images on the board. CFCs are a gas that destroys the ozone layer. Okay, and CFCs come from these everyday products which most people have or use, and so they produce a lot of CFCs. Fridges, aerosols, deodorant, hairsprays, pipe insulation, foam, and AC and solvents. So these are things that we use every day and did produce CFCs. Okay. Now the great thing about CFCs is they were really harmless to humans, but they were they were harmless to humans, but easy to produce and very useful. So chemical companies making them will make a lot of money out of them because they're very useful. However, in the 1970s, scientists proved these chemicals were damaging the ozone shield. And that's one of the scientists down there in the bottom right corner. The chemical industry argued the science was uncertain, therefore continued business as usual. We're making loads of money out of CFCs, let's continue producing CFCs, and they're escaping to the atmosphere and it'll be fine. Business as normal. Now that may sound familiar because tobacco companies for decades were saying that the science on whether smoking was bad for you is uncertain. And also fossil fuel companies would also say that the science on climate change is uncertain. Just like ExxonMobil being a great example of that, because in the 1980s, a report was published by a scientist within ExxonMobil, within the company, and the report clearly said, the science says that if we continue to burn oil and produce CO2, that is going to have a disastrous effect on climate. And the company were at a crossroads. Do we go down the path of embracing this report and warning the world, or do we go down the path of burying this report and continue to make as much money as possible? They went down the second route. They buried the report, sacked the guy that published the report, and carried on and became the biggest company in the world, making the most amount of money. Now, in 1985, though, NASA scientists, this group of guys in the picture, found this hole in the ozone layer and also detected dangerous radiation in Antarctica reaching the Earth's surface. The world quickly acted and met in Montreal in Canada in 1987 to aim to reduce the amount of these chemicals reaching the Earth's atmosphere. The chemical industry lobbied then President Ronald Reagan to deny signing it, just because the science is uncertain, and said that there'd be economic consequences if he signed it. But luckily, US was one of the first countries to sign it, and they actually sped up the process because US signed it, so those other countries were like, yeah, great, we'll sign it as well. And the terminology, the language was changed from phase down to phase out CFCs to get rid of them entirely. So initially, 111 countries signed up. Now, all countries in the world have signed up. And these 111 countries, I want to focus on the countries that didn't sign up initially. I just want to think about that everyone met in Canada. Whoa, there's a hole in the ozone layer. It's getting big fast, and we need to stop emitting CFCs. And there were countries that went, well, we're not signing this. Just let's think about that. But 30 years ago, the world proved it can come together and tackle a global problem with global resolve. It is known to be the greatest or most successful international environmental treaty in history. Okay, so it was successful, and it continues to be successful today. Great. But, however, I do want to point out that today you can get severely sunburnt in Antarctica with only a few minutes of exposure to the sun, and people need to stay covered up. This lady wrote a book. She went to Antarctica and got sunburned very quickly. Thankfully, it's really cold in Antarctica, so sunbathing isn't an Antarctican pastime. I don't know if Antarctican's a word. I just made it up for this. So here's the Montreal Protocol. Everyone signed this treaty, and today people don't know about it. And I wanted to ask the question, or I'll ask you the question: what if they didn't? What if they didn't sign it? What if the other countries that didn't sign it? What if all 197 countries didn't sign it? Those 111 didn't sign it. Okay, what if they said, nah, it's going to cost too much money? So, what if they didn't? So, thinking about the world today and putting today's world in the 1980s, what if the US president didn't listen to scientists, but the chemical companies instead? What if fake news and social media existed in 1985 to confuse the science on the ozone layer? What if Karen on Facebook could claim to know more about UV light than qualified NASA scientists? What if alternative science websites and influencers claimed actually UVA and UVB light is beneficial to human health, similar to in the film where the comet is going to bring jobs to the planet? So what would today be like if these countries didn't sign it? What would it be like? So 2022 without the Montreal Protocol. Well, in the UK, you would get sunburnt in 5 minutes. And that would be worse in other places in the world. UK is quite far north. In 20 minutes, you would need to go to hospital with burns that would be similar to being burned by fire. More than half the world's population would be blind with cataracts. 2/3 of the US population would have skin cancer. But today, because of Australia's proximity to Antarctica, Australians are told 2 in 3 Australians will get skin cancer at some point in their lives because they are closer to that thinner layer of the ozone layer. Also, there would be 3 times the warming today, with far more warming to come, because CFCs are also a very powerful greenhouse gas. So they would continue to warm the planet. And probably more severe, more significant than the rest of these impacts, plants stop growing with exposure to more UV light. Crops would fail worldwide. leading to global food shortages, breakdown of entire ecosystems, and inevitably world wars over the resources that are left with the people that can see. So by 2040, the entire ozone layer would collapse, leading to the end of nearly all life on Earth. So this is the world if they didn't sign that treaty. So knowing that treaty exists, and this is why we have a healing hole in the ozone layer, is important everyday knowledge. So we should probably say thank you to these NASA scientists. These guys, there they are today. There's a picture of them back in the 1980s. And we should consider, so that was 35 years ago, they came together to sign the Montreal Protocol. And the world would be a far worse place if they didn't, or if they had phased down instead of phase out. And so we should consider the Glasgow Climate Pact going forward. So in 35 years' time, the people then, I mean, we'll still be alive, but the young people then will be like, why did you just stand by and let the world continue to emit greenhouse gases? Like, you knew the science. The science has been sound since the 1980s. Why did you just sit and let it happen? So, is enough being done today to avoid catastrophic climate change? And the scientists say no. The scientists, just like in the film Don't Look Up, they're saying this comet is coming, and we're not doing enough about it. And so the scientists today, the climate scientists, are saying there's not being done, and it's really difficult to be really positive about it because there are solutions. You know, the world could act, the world could do this. There are ways around this, but it would be expensive. But it would not be as expensive as doing nothing. Okay, so I just wanted to share my thoughts after watching that film. If you get a chance to watch it, please do. It's quite good. All right, thank you for listening, and have a good day.